Pastor Jess, thank you for being here on the podcast. And I don't mean to say this to flatter you. This is how I honestly feel. You are one of my favorite people to talk to and to listen from.
Well,
Yeah. So thanks for being here.
well, that's an honor. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's good to be here.
Yeah.
Always good to see you. You're one of my favorite people, so I love doing stuff like this with you.
We're
Love the way
in-
you think.
Oh, thank you. We're in Portland, Oregon, and at Ministers Fellowship International Conference, and I was able to sneak you away.
Yes.
Okay, just kind of a softball question to start off. I'm curious what you would think. What is the perfect day in the life of Pastor Jess Strickland?
That's a great question.
Yeah. What happens?
Perfect day, I get up and I would have elongated devotions.
Okay.
So, meaning I try to keep my devotions between 24 and 30 minutes because I think that's where, we try to get everybody to do that 4 or 5 times a week
Yeah.
minimally. So I don't want to go over that because I want to see what is it like. But a great day for me, let's say I'm gonna grab an hour or a little bit more. And then that's done. And I'm gonna read for an hour or two.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna write.
Okay.
Work on something. So this is my perfect day. And then I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive to Helvetia Market.
Okay.
And I'm going to sit out there looking at the farmland where I ran around as a little boy, and I'm just going to sit there and drink coffee for 15, 20 minutes, unless I've called somebody, so you want to meet me.
Yeah.
And so maybe one of the pastors will meet down. Then we'll get in some theological discussion and then discuss ministry things. And then I'll go back and dig into really writing. And then about 1 o'clock, this is perfect day now, 1
Yeah.
o'clock, I'll start walking with a guy.
Okay.
And we'll just start, it'll be usually it's discipleship stuff, meaning I'm working with spiritual formation, things that they're going on in their family, stuff
Yeah.
in ministry, but mostly digging that. Maybe I'll do 2 or 3 of those. That would be my perfect day. By about 4 o'clock, slowing down, thinking about dinner with my wife, then a great dinner with my wife and to bed early. That would be the perfect, that'd be the perfect day. So that's heaven to me right there.
You've mentioned, I've heard you talk about literally just going on a walk with different men and asking them questions and helping them to know Jesus, look like Jesus. Is there something intentional about going on walks with men, or is that just, hey, it's a way to burn calories instead of sitting down at a coffee shop? Is there something, like, what do those look like?
Well, when you're walking and both heads are straight ahead, you're not looking each other in the eye. So
Yeah.
you're walking and you're talking. I think negative emotions are the devil's playground. If you got a negative emotion going on, either the devil's in that, he's coming into it, he's been in it, something's going on. I'd even go so far to say demonically, but I'm not, you got a demon in you that you're gonna vomit out. I'm not talking like that, but you got the devil messing with you. And there is something about on a walk, and so when I'm asking one of the emotion questions, guys will start talking.
Yeah.
And then here comes the next question. Why do you think is that? Why do you think is that? Why do you think is that? And now they're talking and they're walking and they're not looking at you. So it's almost like they're in, I'd kind of like this, they're almost like this in this drift space with God, with you.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like this is the feeling I get. I feel like at times, like together, we're entrusting our hearts to Jesus and to one another. That's the best I can describe. And then all of a sudden, it'll pop.
Yeah.
They'll say something that I'll say, I think now we're getting at the root of where that emotion is coming from and where the devil is really, really messing with you. Then we can start unpacking and taking on things from there. Then if we can go into marriage or ministry or the things, those become much easier to talk about because you don't have that kind of stabbing going on. So I call it this, I feel like, that's the only way I've been able to describe it, I feel like we together get in this drift with Jesus.
Yeah.
And we're just entrusting ourselves into his hands.
Yeah.
And just things come out of there that's really wonderful.
So you mentioned how negative emotions, in some sense, is like the devil's playground in our mind. I want to dig into this for just a minute. So let me just lay this out, and then I would love for you to tell me your thoughts. I think about like Halloween coming up, and at least for sure in Pentecostal churches, there's just a lot of divide over what's okay to do, what's not okay. Is this, and so maybe that's why I'm thinking about this. But the two sides I see to when it comes to like spiritual warfare and things of that nature is I do think sometimes people can get into an area where they become superstitious. It's not even discernment, it's just superstitious. And I think about when Paul writes to the Romans, and in some sense he tells them, you guys are eating meat, offered to idols, and you're actually weak in the faith, and it might not be Romans where he talks about meat to idols. Maybe that's Corinthians. Is it? Okay.
Both.
Yeah. But either way, there's division over what they're eating and drinking, and he doesn't want them to offend their brothers, but at the same time he's calling them weak in the faith, and so there's that angle where I go, listen, sometimes I think people get superstitious about things where they think every single thing is some sort of portal to the direct access to the satanic world, and Christians are going to become possessed or something if they. At the same time, I do think Christians, are the eyes of our hearts are, enlightened, and we should have discernment that the world doesn't have. Where do you feel like spiritual warfare, and I'm using that term broadly, how do we not fall into this trap of just becoming superstitious in everything? There's a demon behind everything, and I'm using that in quotes, and yet we're discerning about what's going to guard our hearts. I know it's broad, but where do you start with that?
Well, that is broad. It probably goes back maybe a little bit to my concept of devil.
Yeah.
Which I hope is a Bible concept.
Yeah.
Because Satan and theology is not a well-developed area because there's just not a lot there. But what I love most is I love what Jesus said about the devil from the beginning. He's a liar.
Yeah.
What did he lie about from the beginning? He really lied about whether or not if you do something, you'll die. And everything's based on that. So I think I could do this sin here, and I don't think I will. I think I can get away with this. Everything working in our life is simply this. Will this really hurt me? Can I get away with this? Will this really entrap me? And if I don't think it will, I might go ahead and do something that I shouldn't do. To me, that's the battle right there. So if we're saying, are you demonically possessed if all of a sudden you say, I think I can get away doing this sin, therefore I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think you're possessed, but I do think when I get in those traps, I am under the influence. I'm being influenced in a direction that he doesn't want me in. Here is the problem. If I get influenced over and over and over and over again, it can become chronic. I'm still not saying that if you have a chronic issue where you're sinning over and over and over again, I'm still not saying that you're demon possessed, but the powers of darkness are certainly working more and more in your life. Now, having said all that, I go to another thing that Jesus said, and he turns around to Peter and he says, "Get thee behind me, Satan." But it's the next line that's very interesting because he defines a little bit Satan to him.
Yeah.
For your mind is on the interests of man. It's a little bit like saying you're interested in being king.
Yeah.
Instead of me being king. You're interested in doing it the way you think it should be done in your kingly way instead of letting God do it in his kingly way. And I think that's all the issue. So let's talk about Halloween just for a minute. I don't like Halloween, but there's a reason. I've been in houses that I think were actually haunted. Phenomenon I can't explain. And so when I watch, it's not like if I watch a horror movie,
Right.
I'm not, in my mind, I'm not saying it's sin.
Sure.
I'm just saying I don't like being reminded. It'd be like my dad didn't like watching a war movie.
Sure.
So like Halloween and stuff is it's a personal gig. People got to figure that out. But what we got to be true to, I think, is our conscience, and then be aware, am I asserting my interest? And that's more a personal thing than I could judge you for. And then I layer over into that, am I pursuing my interest, and am I telling myself a lie? And that's a harder thing to figure out. Now let's circle back to the walks. That's what I'm trying to get at. Is there a place where, let's say you and I are walking, is there a place you and I where we've lied to ourselves and said we could get away with something that's really killing us? Let's take a simple thing. is actually the attention you're giving your wife right now. Are you telling yourself, I can get away with this, but it's actually killing your marriage? Let's dig into that. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So I don't think somebody's possessed over that.
Right.
But I do think there's I think when my interest is imposing itself against the will of God, I think that's satanic.
Right.
So I don't have to say, well, the devil's doing some weird things. No, my interest, which
It's lining up with the will,
Yeah.
the desire of the satanic.
so I don't in my so this and this will be crazy theological. I don't know if there's a difference between my interest and the devil. But I think from what Paul says, this would be that take a long time. I think when I am demanding my interest, I think it can take on a life. Here we go, a personality of its own. It's not me, but the sin in me. What are you saying, Paul? It's like he's saying, this thing, it begins to drive you. It begins to take on a power of its own. And so when I look at demonic things, if this helps answer your question,
Yeah.
that's how I look at it. Now, I was just the other day praying for a guy. I'm sinning. He's on the floor, gagging and puking. I've got to get down on the floor because it's in a church. I don't want this whole thing to turn into.
This is during church?
Well, it's at an altar
Sure,
call.
okay.
But the last thing you want in a church
Right.
is everything's off of Jesus now, and look at the
Yeah.
devil making
spectacle,
his-
yeah.
So I'm getting down, on the floor because of my my thought with him, and how I watch Jesus. I get my arm around. He's heaving like I'm worried he's going to vomit on their floor, and then we're going to have to clean that up. And so I just get down on him, and I start talking to his interest, but I do it like this because Jesus did it like this. Devil, you have no authority to do this. You leave now without incident. Then I said his name. Did you hear me? I'm telling that which is within you to leave without incident. Rah! Ooh. And just like he seized right back. I don't know what went on there, but
Right.
he gets up. 2-3 days later, I see him. He's free.
Wow.
So, and I told him, I said, well, you're free, but still doesn't mean you better find somebody to disciple. You get it,
Yeah.
all of that other stuff. So my view of probably the demonic is probably real low level, and it's not very good, but that's just kind of my view and how we handle it. So my whole thing is to always, how you can stir up fights between people?
Yep.
Why stir up maybe behavior that's incited by my interest or my desire to be seen or whatever else that I think is very related to whatever the demonic world is? I try not to incite that. The whole thing is to get people out of the lie and into letting Jesus be the total king of their life.
Yeah.
So that's a really long answer, and there's a lot of stuff in there, but
there's a lot.
that's kind of how I view things. And I'm willing to be corrected on that. I mean, because I do think this whole devil thing it's tough.
No, I agree with you that it's tough. I don't know exactly where I land. Because I remember some years ago thinking, and when I say some years ago, this would have been a decade ago. Because I remember who I was talking to about this, and it was actually at MFI a decade ago.
Wow.
Remember, yeah.
Wow.
But I remember because I said, when I look at the scriptures, and it's kind of like, who am I? But just when I look at the scriptures, the concept that I grew up with, and I don't think this was even intentionally instilled in me. Maybe it came from friend conversations and whatnot. But the devil's a worship leader in heaven, and one day he just says, I would like to be sung about, and a third of the angels are all dumb enough to just go, yeah, sorry Yahweh, we're following this guy, just out of the blue. A third of the angels are that dumb that they would rebel against God in all of his glory. I'm like, that's wild to me. Before even the creation of humanity. And so then the devil's cast down, and there he is in the garden, and he's swindling, and I just thought, when I look at those passages, I can't cross those T's and dot those I's. But what I do struggle with is, I think where I lean right now is the first rebellion does not happen in the heavenlies, if you will, but it happens right there in the garden. I think that is where that entity first actually rebels.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen before that. I don't think God ever, God didn't create sin, didn't create this rebellion. He created creatures. And for whatever reason, one of them wants to thwart the very thing made in the image of God. I'm gonna grab my jacket. You keep going.
Yeah, so I'm writing this book on faith,
Yeah.
and I'm actually I think I'm gonna title it when I'm done. I mean, I'm almost done with it.
Yeah.
Right now, the title on it is The Book of.
Okay.
Because I think the preposition is everything.
Yeah.
Because should of the translators, and we'll see in 20 years, we'll see what your generation does, because I think you'll get it corrected. Should it be faith in Jesus, because there's no preposition in the Greek, or should it be the faith of Jesus?
Yeah.
So so I tell this story. I'll just briefly do it today. So my image is, and I, like in the book, I create, I drop our solar system in the midst of a galaxy that's already created. There is a hole just for God to do this thing. So it may not have happened that way, but I dropped that way. But anyway, so I have a continent and I have the oceans looking different. I have an interest. I study all that stuff. So I can see the world as it was, this beautiful world. And so they're out with God walking, and I see Adam and Eve say to God, "Stay here."
Huh.
And it's just a heartbreaking thing. We'll be right back. And part of that instinct is part of what he wanted anyway, but then they leave. And I think when we want to think thoughts away from God, I think it creates the potential for imaging. And here comes the serpent. And I don't know how this happened, but I do think, I totally agree with you. I think all of the rebellion took place there. And I know we have the fallen angel and all that stuff, and I can't get there scripturally. Whether it happened or not, I don't think those passages that they use
Or describing something.
I don't think it's describing that. It's, I think it is meant for what it's meant for. But I do think this beautiful creature is coming up. And I think when we start thinking thoughts away from God, we do, that the automatic question comes into us. And I think James describes what happens there. And so hear this question: would I really die? Is God keeping something from me? And I think this is all happening right there. When they're there with God, they have the image of Jesus. And this is why this is so important to me. The image of Jesus is simply this: absolute and total fidelity to the Father. You are my King, and I love you. And all of his life flows out of that. It doesn't flow out of laws or legalism, or I got to do this or that, or do or don't celebrate Halloween. It doesn't come from that. It comes like, here's what I'm going to do. That's why some people do different things with Halloween.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to honorably, I just want to stay close to the Father.
Yeah.
Down here, in my mind, the crux of what they lost was fidelity to God. My heart, my heart is yours.
Yeah.
I think that's what they lost there. Now, here's the weird thing. When they lost that and they gave their allegiance to themselves, I will be king, thus making devil king, I think. This is the crazy thing. They couldn't find their way back to God. And we know what happened to them because they're looking at each other for we don't know how long, and they don't realize we don't have clothes on. And the reason they don't realize they have clothes on, Adam didn't even know he was alone. God had to tell him. Because they were so God conscious, they weren't paying attention to themselves. And the moment they bought that lie, and I think this is where evil just cascaded into the world. The moment they believed that lie, all of a sudden they became self-conscious and lost their God consciousness. In that self-consciousness, and this is the wonder of God, I don't think they could find God. Now, they maybe could have retraced their steps, but it still wouldn't have done any good. Their heart could not have taken them there. So now they got to flee, run, they're making fig leaves, all that stuff. And here comes the story, and this is the story of the ages. God comes looking for them. So I tend to agree with you. I don't think this heavenly thing that we create of the devil, I think the devil and the creation of the devil has a lot more to do something in us than it does something that God. I can't believe God created evil.
So, okay, I want to ask one follow-up question on that, and then we can move on to some other things. But I want you to push back because I'm hearing what you're saying. I think a lot of it makes sense, but there's one part where I go, okay, but what about this?
It's probably the part I don't have an answer to.
And that's okay.
Because there is a flaw in this, and you're picking up on it.
I mean, I would assume you believe that there is whatever language we want to use, but some sort of heavenly court. There is, there are spiritual beings that God has created, right? And so, what is the hang up for you in when you look at the scriptures, and thinking that there is a spiritual entity, there's some sort of guardian angel, whatever we want to call it. Heiser has a whole theory on this, and I think I think it's interesting. I'm not sure if I can get there all the way, but that there's some sort of spiritual being that God has created. God didn't create evil, but He did create this being, and this being has a will, and somehow throws something out there to Adam and Eve, and they bite along with it. What's the problem in your mind theologically with there being some sort of separate entity God has created that is present at the garden, that is separate from Adam and Eve, nothing to do with projection per se? What's the theological hang up for you?
Well, I don't know that I have a hang up. It could go that way.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think of it that way.
Okay.
And the way I think of it is far more frightening.
Okay.
So let's go back to Germany.
Okay.
Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
He takes a whole nation. He takes the majority of that nation and focuses them on eliminating Jews.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how did he do that? Paul references that and talks about principalities and powers.
Mm-hmm.
So, where did these principalities and powers come from? Have they been here all the time? On and on we can ask this question. And I don't know where they came from. But here's what frightens me. What if group commitment, group allegiances, literally create these beings? Now, I think of it that way, and I could be incredibly wrong, but let's say you and I get together. This is why I think of it this way. Let's say you and I get together, and we start gossiping about somebody over there. I think our very discussion and the very commitment of our heart to hate that person over there can actually create the being or the personality. That's how I view it. So instead of having to have God create a being that is in any way evil, I think the power of our spirit and our mind could potentially be that great. Because I just look at how, look at our nation going on right now. We have these two sides politically. It's like a spirit was created that's driving both sides in this kind of insanity, even to the point where many Christians get caught up into it.
Yeah.
So even if I'm wrong about this, and I could be dead wrong, I like to think of it that way because it guards my heart. Lord, is it possible that my very thoughts with other people, like in the church, against somebody or whatever, could it create a demonic force that would wage its war against somebody I like and actually kind of curse it? So I'm not sure that that's right. Maybe God did create a being, but in my own mind, it kind of helps guard me. What if I'm the guy helping creete this thing? So I don't have the answer to you, but that's how I do it.
No, that's fine. I think it's interesting. I mean, it is a different paradigm because when, some of my friends who are part of the, a Pentecostal tradition and talking about, talking about the demonic and things of this nature is definitely an emphasis for them. They say it in reverse. They would say the spirit of blank is what's causing this in the nation. Yes. Whereas you're saying, I think we're creating the spirit of we're producing that. So that's fascinating.
I'll give you one incident.
Sure.
Years ago, we're in South America. Okay. And I was told before I go, I'm going to be in a meeting. In the middle of this meeting, there's going to be this tremendous demonic thing go on. Okay.
You were, sorry, just to understand, you were told that you were going to a meeting and there's going to be some...
Yeah, when I go to this foreign country, I'm going to be in a meeting and this demonic thing is going to happen in the middle of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
So I'm there. It happens.
What happens?
This 90-pound girl is just throwing guys off, and she is clearing out.
She's throwing men?
Well, I can't tell. Guys are popping back from where I'm sitting. I don't know what's going on, but people are either jumping way back, or she's hitting them or something. But it's cleared out.
Yeah.
And so, I'm preaching. I got to go down there. I take my team in, and we kind of get her settled down. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a young man, don't know what I'm doing. And I said, in a fairly large building, I said, well, take her in the basement, cast this demon out. Well, I have to be honest with you, it freaked me a little bit because
Yeah.
it looked like she's throwing guys off.
Right.
And so I'm saying, I don't think I'm going to go down there because if I get beat up tonight, I got to preach.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. So I sent them down there. Well, I'm down there and I hear her screaming, and she's whatever's going on in there's
While
not
you're
leaving.
preaching still?
While I'm preaching. So I go down. What are you doing? It will not leave. And I got some really good guys down there. And I said, well, let me listen to what you're doing. And they're talking to her in English. So, well, the demon will understand English. I said, no, he won't, because of what I think.
So remind me, what country are you in?
It's a Spanish.
Oh,
language.
okay.
Yeah. I said, speak in Spanish, go through an interpreter. That demon was gone in 5 minutes. And they turned and said, well, why?
Really?
And I said, because I believe that the demon is operating in her own interest. You have to address her will. You have to address her interest. So again, this proves nothing. This is like,
Sure.
I'm about the, here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You guys are going to figure all this out. Your generation will figure this out because more and more of this is happening.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out. I don't know, but I'm just saying,
Right.
in that situation, and that's just kind of one, that has proven true when I've faced demonic issues throughout life. So that's why I tend to think like this thing largely is coming from my interest, and it builds it because Paul, the other issues, Paul said, it's the sin in me.
Right.
Well, why are you treating sin like it's a person? Because I think he's saying
I've
sin
thought
has
this.
this effect.
I've thought this for years because Paul does talk about sin in different ways.
Yeah.
He talks about like the consequence of an action almost, but he also talks about like this power, almost like this venom that's breathing and living, and and in the book of Romans, and you get to Romans 7 where there's the man who goes, I want to stop sinning, but I can't stop sinning, and I tend to think that that passage might be Paul speaking in first person, but rhetorically speaking as if he was Adam, maybe.
Yes.
That's a theory I have about Romans 7,
Yep.
because he says before the law was given, he talks about before any law was given.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a whole nother rabbit trail, but I
But
agree with you.
these are all things that implicate.
Yes.
They all implicate. Now, because I need to say this in your jersey, and you're such a wonderful, and I know you don't like calling yourself this, but you're such a wonderful theologian. What seems to be happening from when I was your age, it seems like the nuanced discovering of like what words really meant back in Jesus' time, what the historic life of Jesus was like. To me, I think we're discovering more and more. And I think this is helping us open up truth, because what happens, particularly in America, we read scripture, like when most people, they think, right, unmerited favor. Yes, but no.
Right.
Because once you receive the gift, you are now obligated for the favor you receive.
Yeah.
Now, we don't think of grace that way.
Yeah.
So all these nuances of things just keep coming out. I think when it comes to evil, the same thing is going to take place, because remember, someday your prophets will be calling fire from heaven. I mean, someday when prophets are really working here, when empires are falling and the end of the world is coming, tremendous things will be happening. Why? Because I think the church is going to know how to deal with the demonic forces that are going on. And I think to some degrees we've over-spiritualized them, and we've undertaken responsibility. So somewhere in there does all this evil exist. So.
Okay, that's wonderful. Let me ask you this. This maybe more of a pastoral question. Somebody comes to you, in light of everything we just talked about, and they say, Pastor Jess, I want to live free from the power, the entity of sin, the influence of sin. And what I really appreciate what we just talked about is self-interest, the will, and the role that plays. I do get frustrated at times talking to some of my friends when they talk to me about these sort of discussions, because they would never say, oh yeah, I'm not accountable for my actions. But that's kind of how they describe it. Well, the devil and the devil and the devil and the devil, this person is just influencing me, and I'm going, oh, well, you play a role in this. But anyways, if someone comes to you and they go, I want to guard my will, I don't want to be inward focused, have that self-interest that attaches itself to a demonic agenda or whatever we might call that. How do I combat that in my life? I know there's probably a lot of things, but what would you tell somebody if they said, what are one or two things, either privately, corporately, that I can do to adjust my will? Maybe even somebody comes to you and they're a little bit haunted because they just heard this conversation and they say, deep down, I don't really know if, I love Jesus, but I don't know if he's my greatest desire. That scares me. How do I redirect that thing in me towards him? What's one or two things that come to mind?
Well, it's interesting. A pastor said that exact thing to me last night.
Wow.
Had a whole thing with him, just kind of unburdening his heart, telling me. The church, the charismatic church, largely in America, I'm going to start here, is driven by getting people into church, hands raised, worshiping God. That is the thrust of almost all, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of American pastors.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jesus says this. He said, I would rather you be concerned not with how many hands are raised on some Sunday morning, but how many knees are bending in closets. Because here's what's happened. If I walk into my worship service, where I attend church, and I participate in it, but I haven't been bended knee in a closet, worship becomes a dopamine hit, and I call it the presence of God. And I'll explain knees in a minute. If I've been on my knees and I walk, because one thing I won't do is walk away from our worship. I think God wants all out, full throttle worship. The danger part of it, if it's not being done by people that have been on their knees, the thrust of the worship is the gratification they get out of the music and, basically the dopamine hit they get from it. If I've been on my knees and I walk in that worship service, raise my hand, and I'm hitting all these songs, I recognize the dopamine hit is there, but I don't care. It is Jesus I'm longing for.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful thing, and most people, I wonder if they ever hit this worship moment where they're in this wonderful, majestic, just incredible music, and you're not even aware of any pleasure sensors going on off in your body at all. You just have this great longing for Jesus. Wonderful thing. So let's go back. So I think the closet is important. And I think the devil's playhouse is our mind and emotions. And so in America, we've done a couple things. Read your Bible. Okay, so I read the Bible, not making any change in me. Because mental disposition, believing doesn't change anything. Hindus believe, Buddhists believe, Muslims believe, Jews believe, Christians believe.
I use this illustration all the time with people. I believe 100% that working out every day is good for me. In fact, it's a conviction in the sense that you can't convince me otherwise.
Right.
It's not in my will, Jess.
Yes.
I don't want to work out.
Yeah. Well, maybe you don't.
Right.
So I go back to this because we have all these beliefs. And so you know what we do in Christianity? We try to get people to use the same belief, the same believer in me that the Hindus, Buddhists, we try to get them to use the same belief. I think Jesus gave us something different. And that is the problem. And jumping this hurdle, speak to that and it'll go away. Really? Actually, maybe it goes away because that's what hyperfocus does. Because that is a law of the human mind. But that doesn't necessarily satisfy something in the heart. I think we have these four things. We'll go through them again. We read the Bible. We meditate. We gnaw everything. We get what I would call a stream of thought, and we're hoping in this stream of thought, gnawing in the bone, that our thoughts are mixing with God's thoughts, and He's giving us revelation, kind of like you would study for a sermon. And through it, God is probably speaking, but He's not yet speaking like He wants. And then we pray, God help me. And this is what lacks in America, because we have a hard time sitting down mostly because of screens, and that is we contemplate. And this is where the will is changed. And it requires this, and it takes time, and it's really hard for Americans to do. So in my time with Jesus every morning, it would go something like this. I'm done with my devotions, and I'm just sitting there. I'll take a deep breath. And in my mind, sometimes with my mouth, but with my mind at least, Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy on me. And I'm just going like that for a while, till I feel like just, okay, Jesus, I'm on you now. My mind is on you. Help me. And then I just stop, and I just let my mind start flooding with thoughts from Jesus. Something's going to come in. So maybe what comes in is, I hate somebody, and this is a good way I can get back at them. Oh, God. What am I doing thinking about that? Jesus Christ, have mercy on me. Jesus, I'm back. I don't know. Like, forget all that. My brain is back now. And I'll work that.
Yeah.
And here's what you're looking for, and it'll happen. Some days stronger than others. All of a sudden, your spirit floods with delight. And it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think this is how we abide in Jesus. Oh, God. And you sense it. My greatest joy, my greatest delight is to do what you want me to do. Like, and you know, I write this down in contemplation. It's like 3 or 4 or 5 words, a mere sentence every day. Lord Jesus, I so delight in you. I want your will in this way more than I want my will. So my whole thing in life is, Jesus, I want to delight more in you than I do in my own skin. So give me that sense, give me that joy. And then it enables me to enjoy my skin, because my will is directed towards him. I mean, that would be the answer I'd give, and it's kind of maybe a simple answer, a dumb answer, whatever it is.
That's great.
But I think life has to begin there, and we're very bad at that in America.
Yeah.
And what is actually happening there is you're exchanging something. You're exchanging your believer. Okay, I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to take in the allegiance of Jesus into my heart. His love for the Father, which made him say, not my will, but yours be done.
Yeah.
So I could even find delight in going to the cross.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's raining in Portland, Oregon. It wasn't supposed to.
It's quite shocking, isn't
but it's but it's a beautiful gray day in Portland, Oregon. No, I love that thought there at the end, and I'm so glad you said that. I hadn't linked those together, but it's the love of the Father that makes him say, "Your will be done." It's as you say, the fidelity of Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
The whole world is built on a very fine line that all laws of physics can be predictable. God says, I want you, Austin. I'm going to put you in the world, and I need you to rule a world that works on predictable laws. Thank you, I'll do it. Then we kick over our own predictability and take on a morality that cannot be predicted. And that's sin. That is that's an allegiance. That's what the rebellion is.
Right.
So God is saying, we're going to destroy my created world if I do not have a people to put on it that are predictable. So the whole thing about God is getting that predictable nature back. Well, what is a predictable nature? Oh, whatever the Father wants, whatever his will is, that's what I want to do. That's why we get real tedious about stupid things like, you shouldn't be celebrating Halloween, and you shouldn't be doing this. And that is all nonsense. It's crazy. You want to drink wine, you don't want to drink. I don't have freedom to or not to drink wine. Here's my freedom. I get to delight in what God wants me to do.
Yes.
And frankly, if we would just do that, you and I would either drink the wine or celebrate Halloween or whatever it else is that people find on the margins. We would do that in the love of God. We'd be fine.
Yeah.
That's why Augustine said, love God, do what you please. Now, that's a horrible statement, but love God means have this wonderful allegiance to Jesus, and then you'll end up, what you're doing will end up pleasing God. So.
Right.
And yet I want to fight with you. I want to look on you religiously and harp on like you shouldn't be eating that meat. That's just, Paul was trying to say, it's just stupid. Let it go.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Well, Pastor Jess, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I feel like we could do this for about 4 more hours, but I got a camera over there and I can't get it too wet.
Oh yes, you cannot. Got to keep that dry. Okay, but, it's fun.
I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I really am thankful for you, and hopefully this doesn't sound weird. I'll just end it right here. Okay. Hopefully this doesn't sound weird. But I was talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was, and I had mentioned your name, and they said, who's that? I said, and I was explaining just who you were. You're the pastor of this church. You live here. And I said, you know, I love Pastor Jess. I mean, there's multiple reasons, but he's orthodox on all those essential things, you know. I'm not wondering, does he really believe that Jesus Christ saves, or, is sin really this, or, but you have a creative, and I mean this literally, a creative imagination. I don't mean imagination just as in terms of, people daydreaming and thinking about weird things, but the way you literally imagine and parse things out, I appreciate. And so anyways, that's what I appreciate about you.
You might find this interesting.
Sure.
I'll say this just to end here. Years ago, when I was in what became MFI, they used to have speakers come in. One of them was Ern Baxter.
Okay.
He'd come here and preach. Because I think he is partly the reason for that. He, in a teaching but a prophetic way, started prophesying what guys like N.T. Wright are writing volumes of books about. So I felt like way back in the 70s, I was already getting ready for, I don't know, I guess I would say thoughts that I think lean more into a kingdom reality than just into, because I want orthodoxy. I just don't want stupid, traditions of men. I want to do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Which, by the way, can I say this about?
Yeah.
It's what I love about you.
Oh.
Because, young people are trying to deconstruct everything. That's not the way. But you do go back and I would say I have the same appreciation. You do go back and deeply root in orthodoxy, and yet you yourself are trying to pry what all this means in real time in life, which I think was Paul's struggle, and I think you do an excellent job with it. So
I just have too many questions is the problem.
Oh, I love
That's
it.
what keeps me going.
Yeah.
I have too many questions. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for listening or watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Good.